Dear chess lovers, welcome back to my channel. FIDE World Rapid and Blitz Championship happening on Poland. The very first game, Magnus Carlsen played against the Georgian Grandmaster Merab GAGUNASHVILI. Extraordinary stuff from GAGUNASHVILI, but luckily Carlsen wins this game. Carlsen started with e4, GAGUNASHVILI replayed with e5. Then knight f3, knight c6, bishop to b5, Rilapus, then a6. Then bishop a4, knight f6. Here most of the top players will castle the king, but Carlsen selected a d3. Then b5, bishop b3, bishop e7, now a4. Then GAGUNASHVILI played rook b8, then a takes b5. After a takes b5, Carlsen goes to castle, h3, h6, now knight c3. Here GAGUNASHVILI played d6, then bishop d2, rook e8. Here Carlsen played knight d5, tried to exchange the bishop or knight, but GAGUNASHVILI don't like to give up the bishop, then he played bishop f8, then Carlsen played Qb1 Be7, then bishop e6, knight takes f6, Qb takes f6, then rook a6. Now GAGUNASHVILI played knight to d8. Here Carlsen exchanged the bishop on e6, then knight takes e6, then Qb a2. Trying to bring the another rook on a1, now Qb e7, then rook a1, now rook e8. Here Carlsen played rook a7, then Qb d8. After Qb d5, GAGUNASHVILI played c6, Carlsen go back to Qb a2. Now GAGUNASHVILI played rook to c7, here Carlsen played Qb a5. Then after rook takes a7, Qb takes a7, GAGUNASHVILI played Qb c8. Here Carlsen played Qb a6, asking exchange the Qb's. GAGUNASHVILI says if you want you can take it, I will play bishop e7. Now Carlsen took the Qb, then rook takes c8, now g3. Stopping the knight to f4, then king f8, king g2, king e8, bishop to e3, then bishop to g5. Here Carlsen exchanges the knight with the bishop. After h takes g5, king f3, then f6, king g4, then g6, h4, g takes h4, king takes h4. Now rook c7, then king g4, king f7. Here Carlsen played rook a8, occupied the last rack. Here GAGUNASHVILI played d5. Now pawn f4, GAGUNASHVILI took the pawn on e4, then d takes e4, again e takes f4, g takes f4, now knight g7. Here Carlsen played king to f3, GAGUNASHVILI played pawn f5. Then bishop d4, after f takes d4, there is a check to their king, then king takes e4, now knight f5. GAGUNASHVILI don't like to enter into rook endgame. Here Carlsen played bishop to c5, GAGUNASHVILI played rook d7, then b4, rook d2, rook a7 check, king e8. Here king e8 seems a little bit passive move. Black could select king e6. If white attack the pawn on c6 with rook c7, then black could go to rook ending. Knight to d6. If bishop d6, then king d6, which is fine. Or if king goes to f3, then king d5 will be a little bit fine. But it is a rapid game. Anything could happen in time pressure. GAGUNASHVILI go to king e8. Then Carlsen utilized the chance. He played king to e5. After rook takes c2, rook c7, rook e2 check, then king f6. Now if you see, white king reaches nearby the pawn. Now GAGUNASHVILI select a very good move, rook e4. Here king takes g6, after rook takes f4, king g5. Here Carlsen played some magical moves. Here Carlsen gives some pressure with the rook and knight attack. GAGUNASHVILI played rook f1, then rook takes c6, king d7. If you note, the knight on f5 has not that much mobility. Here Carlsen played rook b6, attacking the pawn on b5. Here if you note, there is not that much mobility for this knight. For example, if knight goes to e7, there is a check, and then black will lose the knight. Even knight g7, obviously black is losing his knight because of a skewer attack. So GAGUNASHVILI played knight g3. Here Carlsen did not take this pawn. He goes to rook d6 check. After king c7, rook e6. Carlsen controlled the important two knight squares. Now again GAGUNASHVILI played king d7, rook e5, rook f3, king g4, now rook b3. Here king f4, then king c6, rook e6 check, king d7. Because if king comes to d5, again there is a check on rook d6. After king c4, again there is a check on rook d4. Now black king has to go here. Now there is a blockade for the support. White can take the knight. For this reason GAGUNASHVILI go to king d7. Now again rook e5. If you note, there is no option for this knight. If you note, there is no good square for this knight. Here again GAGUNASHVILI play king c6, bishop f2. Carlsen forced to move this knight to either h1 or f1 because no more square. Here GAGUNASHVILI played knight f1. After bishop e1, defending the pawn on b4, GAGUNASHVILI played knight h2. Here Carlsen played rook c5 check, king b6, bishop to c3, cutting off the rook's control. Now knight f1. Here again Carlsen played bishop e1. Now again knight e3. Then king to e4. Now knight c4. Now the position seems a little bit safe for black. But of course, if you see the position, obviously the position is equal. But there is a time pressure for both players. So both are played for time. After knight c4, Carlsen played king d4. Then GAGUNASHVILI played rook b1. Then again bishop c3. Now rook d1 check. Here king e4. Then knight d6. Again king f4. Now rook d3. Now Carlsen played bishop e1. Then again knight c4. Now bishop f2. There is a discovered check to black king. Here GAGUNASHVILI played a very good move, king b7. Because by mistake if king goes to a6, now there is a very good move for white, rook to c7, checkmating threat. If black would like to avoid the checkmate, black has to play only knight b6, then after rook c6, there is a knight loss for black. So king b7, very good decision for GAGUNASHVILI. Then rook takes b5, check, then king a6, again rook c5. Now knight d6, king e5, threat is rook c6 check and taking the knight. Here knight f7 check, king e6, knight to d8 check, king e7. After king b7, Carlsen played pawn b5, then rook d2, attacking the bishop on f2. Carlsen played bishop e3. Now rook d3, rook e5, defending the bishop. Now king c7. Here rook e4, then rook d5. Now rook c4 check. Here king b7. Again Carlsen played rook to c3, defending the double attack. Because if position goes to king and rook endgame, then most probably this could be a draw. Then GAGUNASHVILI played king b8, then bishop to b6, attacking the knight. Now rook takes b5. GAGUNASHVILI lost the knight. After bishop takes d8, of course this position is also draw, but Carlsen played for time pressure. After bishop takes d8, king b7, king d6, rook b1, bishop e7, rook d1 check, king e6, then king b6. Now bishop to d6, king b5, rook to c5 check, again king b6, now king d7. Here GAGUNASHVILI played rook h1, then a rook to c2, rook h7 check, then king e6, rook to h5. Now bishop e5, rook h1, bishop to d4 check. When black played king b5, then king to d5, rook to h5, then bishop e5. Here king b6, now rook b2 check. If you note, black king has no square to escape. Brilliantly, Carlsen is cornering this king because there is no square for the king to escape. Then Gagunashvili played king a6. After king d6, rook h6 check. Then king c7, king a5. Now bishop d6, rook h1, king to c6, rook c1 check. Then bishop c5, king goes to a4. Here, because of time pressure, after rook b4 check, Gagunashvili by mistake go to king a3, fell the trap in discover check. Then rook b1. White is winning the rook obviously. Here Gagunashvili resigned the game. Superb game from Georgian Grandmaster Merab Gagunashvili, but luckily Carlsen win in time pressure. Very good game. We'll see more games in World Rapid and Blitz Chess Championship 2021 happening in Poland. We'll see you on next game.